Welcome to the Paisans podcast. We're your hosts, the brothers from other mothers, Dante, Dave, and Sarc. Join us as we talk about current events, our wives, kids, or whatever else life is throwing at us this week. You're with the Paisans, you're with family.
We never talked about Terrence Howard being back on the slogan with Weinstein.
Really? Didn't we? Oh, wow.
We just talked about it that one time. I mean,
Yeah, you're right.
problem is I listened to that quite a while ago now. I mean, well, do you remember when that came out? It's got to be a while.
Oh, it was at this point. It was over a month ago. You know, it
Yeah.
was like might even be 2 months ago. It wasn't Brett Weinstein, Eric Weinstein. The two of them are brothers, and Brett Weinstein's a very intelligent guy too. He does a bunch of really interesting things. But basically, what they did was he had him back on. You know, Eric Weinstein came on and came on Joe Rogan and said, "Please have me on with Terrence Howard. I think I want to review some of the things that Terrence Howard talked about." And actually, I have to tell you, Terrence Howard was pretty gracious. The guy, Eric Weinstein, did a great job of like being patient, pointing out what some of the things that Terrence Howard was talking about, that he's like, you actually have something when you talk about this one thing. But there was quite a few other things that he said, and like things that he was making, and then assumptions he was making, and then building on. And he was like, hang on. All your assumptions are completely wrong. That can't be true because this and this. And there were multiple things where Terrence Howard was just like, well, see, what I discovered was this. And he's like, hang on, time out. You see, what's going on is you're walking into a room of experts, of people who have dedicated their life to this subject. Okay, dedicated their lives to this subject, and you're pretending as if you are going to educate all of them. He's like, and it doesn't mean you have nothing to offer, but it means that we should bring a bunch of humility and just a little bit of like, hey, maybe I've got something here. And he said to him, and he was really fair. He's like, I've tried to do a really careful analysis of all the things that you said. And he went through it, and he was like, you said 10 things. 9 of them were wrong. 6 of which were batshit crazy. Okay. But you said one thing that actually you might be onto something. And I wouldn't try to explain it here as to what it was that he said. You have to listen to to that podcast to hear it. But he was acknowledging that Terrence Howard wasn't completely crazy. He was basically just like, you're a very intelligent person. You've read enough to have a basic understanding of things, but then your ego is sort of allowing you to believe that you're making these grandiose discoveries about things that are like, no, people have spent their lives researching what you're talking about. And so they know that what you're saying is all based on like somebody saying, oh, when I look out at the horizon, I can see the curve to it. So I know that the earth is only this big. And it's like, whoa, hang on a second. That
What's
type of thing.
What's his area of expertise, Weinstein or the brothers?
He's a professor of something in the mathematics field, might be in the physics field, that type of thing, but it's mathematics and physics related.
Okay. And the same thing with the brother, or the brother is
no. Brett Weinstein is an evolutionary biologist.
Got it. Okay.
And
Smart
so
brothers.
he's got some just imagine the Thanksgiving. Right?
Smarter than us,
a couple
for
of
sure.
Dudes.
So how did Terrence Howard take all of this? Was there any point where he became argumentative about it? Was he offended?
Fairly gracious, actually. Like he was pretty gracious. I mean, he wanted to really run with a lot of these ideas. Like he even was still, as Weinstein, whatever, however you pronounce the name, was explaining like why he was basically wrong. He still wanted the opportunity to continue his explanation as to what he was seeing. So he did have to get roped in a little bit, but he was at least saying, he's like, no, I appreciate everything you're saying. Like, this is like, I need this. Like, he was kind of like acknowledging that, like, he needs to be roped in. And it seemed like he was being humble enough to continue a conversation where he gets kind of like told the hard facts and like told like, no, you're wrong. And he seemed open to being humbled, honestly. Like it was an interesting conversation, I thought. And I thought they were being fair to him, I thought. And he was being somewhat reasonable back. So like, I don't know, because like he is reading stuff that I don't understand and looking at things that I don't understand, talking about these things that I really don't get. But yeah, I mean, I guess there was some positive coming out of it.
That's why the first appearance by when he was on Rogan, when Terrence Howard was on Rogan, just let him go,
Yeah.
So he was
Yeah, he
just
did.
boom and boom and boom and boom and boom, and and we were talking about he was borderline manic, like, and I think he teeters into that space. Like, I think he's got a very active mind, and whatever his issues might be. Like, so I think he was borderline manic when he was going through that stuff. To me, that's still how he sounded. But
Yeah, I think it's possible.
right, but at the same
Yeah.
time, I think that when he was on the second time, he kept getting roped in. He would, like Dave said, he would try. He was like sort of starting to get rolling, and then Eric Weinstein was like, "Hang on, hang on, hang on, hang on." I got to stop you before you keep going, because you've said this, and I can't just leave you allowed to say this, because everything you're going to say from now on is based on a fallacy. What you just said is wrong, okay? And here's why it's wrong. And Dave is right, There's argument, but then he kept wanting to go back to the same point and keep going. Hang on, you can't just say "but" and then ignore everything I've just said. Like you.
It was good that I was able to check him like that, where it was
Yes.
because like he was like Terrence. He's like, you need to stop. Like he'd be like,
Yes.
you need to stop.
Yes.
And like
Yes.
he's like, you just need to take a step back. And like he was repeating a lot of the same things. Like you really, like what you were saying before, Dante. Like he was saying that you're going into a room of these people who have dedicated their lives to this, so they're not taking it well. Like when you come in, like and just basically like you're pulling the china shop, just like knocking over all the stuff that they've built over their lifetimes.
Oh yes.
And
you're going to act like you're educating them. He's like,
right.
You got to go in with a little humility, like maybe they do know some things that you don't as well,
Mm-hmm.
So it was really great to see. I think it was an excellent, it's something good that society could use a lot more of, to bring Terrence Howard back with an expert, have a conversation, have it be amicable, have Terrence Howard, to his credit, be grateful to learn and to hear more, not just dig in and scream and holler. And, could have become the Jerry Springer show.
I mean, that part really surprises me. Not that I think he would have started screaming and hollering, but I'm actually surprised he didn't dig in and put up an argument.
I was surprised too, man. I have to tell you, I was impressed. I thought after the first one, I don't say I underestimated him, but I didn't think all that much of him. I still think he's a bit nuts, and he's living in Hollywood, and so he gets over humored. You know what I mean? Like people patronize him. That's what I think. I think if he was a starving actor, he wouldn't have time for all this bullshit. You know what I'm saying? It's like if he actually was like had to worry about whether he was going to get another acting gig or not. Come on.
I was gonna say Terrence is also he's really passionate about this. I mean, they mentioned one thing, and I didn't see the clip where he did this, but they mentioned during this podcast on Rogan that he spoke to some scientist or something or some professional, and it was while he was on set of this recent show that he was just on that just came out. So and he was all dressed up in a costume, and he did the interview with this person in his like costume because he only had like 30 minutes in between or whatever. He was like really tight on time, and he couldn't like take his whole wig off and his makeup off. So he like did this interview with this like intellect or scientist or whoever in his getup that of like this show that he has that's out. So like he must really care about this stuff. He's trying to do that. Like that, I think that's kind of endearing to him. Yeah, I agree with you guys too. Like I think my opinion changed from the first time I saw him to the second time in terms of like his credibility, I guess, or just him as himself. I don't know what it is exactly.
There was this whole thing where he was what was he trying to say, that one plus zero can't equal zero, or what was he saying about 1 + 1?
1 times 1 equals 2.
That's what it was. Yeah, 1 times. They were going back and forth on that. They were, and then they were going back and forth on as well. Like they started talking about the shapes, and that was where he said that he might have actually been like found something that was sort of an interesting identity. I forget the specifics, but he's like, this is what you found that's interesting. No, you can't build on it, make it bigger than that. No, you can't shrink it down and make it the core of everything. I remember at one point he said something to the effect of like, keep trying to find whatever you've discovered and make it the silver bullet to answer every question.
Yes. The God particle.
But it's exactly.
Exactly. He's like, I have the God particle. It's right.
Mike, bingo, dude.
Shit, I dropped it on my way into the studio.
Particle. That's exactly what.
You could be credible, but
Yeah.
also kind of crazy. To me, like I think the crazy, it kind of gets you to that point. If that that makes sense. It's like you would only do that because of the crazy, or be that brilliant because of the crazy.
Yeah, Dante, like an Angelo Moore in some way, right? I mean, that's kind of where my head goes to some extent.
Right.
Creatives are like
that's a good
that.
example. Yes.
I mean, creatives are like that. And that's what makes them good. I mean, especially
Exactly.
in the lines of like acting or stand-up comedy or music.
Yes. It's like they cross the lines, but they don't know where to draw new ones. And so they're like sometimes all over the place, you know? I mean, Angelo Moore, Mike, is a great example. I mean, that guy, the creativity is genius, on many levels.
Yes.
Like he's genius, and at the same time, just like so compounded. Dave, this is the guy, the lead singer for Fishbone, right?
Yeah.
Shaves his head, mohawk of dreadlocks that he dyes blonde. This was in the back in like the 90s when he was hardcore. And at every show, man, he's jumping off the balcony into the crowd, like super athletic, super like limber, super high energy, bouncing. The guy's made of springs like Tigger, you know what I mean? Like he's all over the place. And he's out of nowhere landing on the stage, catching a saxophone, managing to get it around his neck, and then just nailing every note without missing a beat. Like unbelievable talent. So you see this discipline where he can play the saxophone, like really play the saxophone first and foremost. And then you see this other creativity that comes in where he's just like hyper creative, but in every other area of his life, as far as I can tell, no discipline.
No, it's total chaos.
I'm looking up the lyrics right now. Okay. Mike, should I play this? I don't want to play it. I want to say it. Should I read it?
Yeah.
So they created an album. They called it Chim Chim's Badass Revenge. Okay. Chim Chim is a deep cut reference to Speed Racer.
Speed Racer. That's right.
And Speed Racer always used to have the little monkey with him. The monkey was Chim Chim. Okay. So, and the album is basically, they got dropped by, I think they were owned by CBS or somebody who owned CBS.
Yes.
The original
Columbia?
album. Columbia. Yeah, Columbia CBS, I believe. And
this was Rowdy Records.
Yes, they ended up on another. I mean, so the whole album is pretty much how like the original record labels suck. It's like a rebel album. I mean, it is hardcore. It's crazy. They lost one of their horn players, and they just had a very kind of down and dirty sound on this album. And it opens up with just like a spoken word poem that I'm 120% sure was written by Angelo Moore, because who else would write such a thing? He has an alter ego he calls Dr. Mad Vibe. Okay.
And he performs as Dr. Mad Vibe.
Oh, yes. It's actually cool. It's just out of the fucking, like, off the rails, Language is on fire that are launched start here. The warning of the word goes out to all the above, all the below, and all who have been cast aside, for everyone who is re-energized, criticized, or disguised, from the roof of the powerhouses to the ground floor of your soul, to all who can fathom a subsidiary atmosphere, and to all who can listen to the sound of cyber fear. Chim Chim's Badass Revenge equals the imaginative mind that enables us to resist the strategies of containment brought onto us by political thunder horrors from on high. It's the coming of the digital freak swing versus ape kills master. If you try, you will catch on. Inhospitable cellular chain gangs, and the slaves speak of consumerism, and in the monsters of plastic that await behind the hidden corners of the new hype, the surrender of our dignities and the disintegration of the whammo frisbee, within us all of the side effects of the emerging technopsychology, the push-button landscape of the coming millennia and its intellectual discriminations can't be avoided. They can only be downgraded, repudiated, and he creates a word here. Anthropoplasty. placentrically renovated. The history-distorting legislative heartbeat of the coming century aligns itself with the weakness and overindulgence. Chim Chim's Badass Revenge suggests that you structure your acceptance of the frequencies according to hope in man and a kick-ass outlook. If you try, you will catch on. The reinvention accelerates from this point, for it is with these words in the spirit of Chim Chim's Badass theory of religiosity that we bring you the only antidote that humanity will ever know. Fishbone.
Yeah.
Anthropocentrically. Oh my gosh. I just love
That's
it.
so amazing.
You know, like I'm in awe that he's of what he comes up with, of the analogies that he sees, like the metaphors that he sees here, and at the same time, good God, I feel bad for him.
I know. I think he's still living with his mother. I'm pretty sure. Like, at least in that documentary they put out a few years ago, he was still living with his mom.
You know, I mean, he was talking in that movie, Mike, about being famous but poor, and
Absolutely.
that's, you know, and it's like, that's honest. I mean, one thing too is like he doesn't know but to be honest.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, you know, like he's not pretending to be some big shot. He's like, you know, and I saw them post something the other day too about the cost for merch or something, and they were basically saying like merch is like one of the few ways we have income other than playing gigs, and it's like we have all these other things to pay for, and basically like we're living hand to mouth. I'm like, geez, you know, it's a band with like how many studio albums, Mike? I mean, 10?
Oh my God. Yeah. They've got about 10, and they were signed to some big labels.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had music videos on MTV, quite a few actually. They got radio time in the 90s, 80s.
I'm assuming they toured, right? Like that's where they would make their money, I would think.
Yeah, they had a bunch of guys in the band. You know, when they were at their height, they had 7 guys in the band.
7 dudes.
And several of those guys are gone. And I mean, the turnover in the band, unfortunately, has been, you know, just core guys leaving. Now, one of the core guys came back, and then 2 of the other core guys left, like core guys left. And so it's like, it's sort of like, I don't know, what are some of these bands? The Stones are probably unique anymore, but some of these older bands you go and you see, and it's like, there's one guy from the original band.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Well, that was like the other night. We went to see Megadeth at Jones Beach, and the only original member is Mustaine.
Dave Mustaine.
And I was going to say, like, with Angelo Moore, the thing that got them popular is the same thing that was their downfall, is that, like, no one could really grasp that style. And outside of people that really appreciate, maybe other musicians like us that get it and appreciate it, most people are just like, I have no idea what to do with this music.
I've shared them with so many people, Mike, and so I've gotten such a tepid response. I mean, you know, I what can you say? It's just not for everybody. It's not for everybody. And it has changed so much over the years. I mean, when you listen to their first 2 albums, it's like true pop, not pop, but it's like punk ska. You know, it's very light. It's much lighter, much hoppier, much more reggae ska. Like it's you know, it's really got that hoppy ska feeling to it. And then as you get into like the 3rd album, they got into be like a full on rock band with horns and hard guitars and 2 guitarists, and that was when we really discovered them and really fell in love with their sound. And then ever since then, the music has sort of evolved to be this crazy rock, ska, punk, you know, high energy driving kind of sound, you know, and with the craziness that's just gone up and up and up with each album. They released, Dave, a few years ago, they did like a little EP. They came out with like 8 songs on it. And it's got this song called Let Them Hoes Fight. Let Them, D-E-M, Let Them Hoes Fight. And musically, it's another perfect example of you try and play it and you're like, this isn't as simple as you might think it is. You start really listening. You're like, actually doing some really complicated stuff in here. And there's some really layered stuff in here. And it's actually really hard to play when you start thinking about it. The lyrics, the timing. I'm like, this is, once again, they like trick you with this simple sounding stuff that's actually quite complicated, very fast, hard to keep up with. And then you put all that onto it, and the lyrics are frigging nuts. Okay, hold on. Actually, I gotta get that one. Listen to this. Let them hoes fight, them hoes, they fun. It's hitting through my mouth, singing that no bitch out. They're riding a horse, a rubber goose soup.
We all better dollars, everybody's giving holler. Let them hoes fight. Let them hoes fight. Let them hoes fight. Let them hoes fight. And it came to me like a stripper in the night. In this punk situation, they said let them hoes fight. My mouth began to talk and shot. From this gold covered real short, made them hoes fought. Knock the bitch out was the next phrase that I heard. And the verbs blows and the hoes were toast to toast. The stank old bitches set up a sugar bed glue. And the gargantuan bitches down at each other's tubes.
Hold on a second. Just hold on a second. Let me just read some lyrics. Let me just read what those lyrics were, okay? Let them hoes fight. Them hoes they did fought. A titty flew flop out. A titty flew flop out singing knock the bitch out. Left right at a hook. A blubber glute shook. A blubber glute shook. We all bet our dollars. Everybody screamed at hollers. Let them hoes fight. And it came to me. I can't
What
believe
place
this.
is he describing?
I know, it's like, can you imagine? It's like Thunderdome, you know what I mean? Okay, and it came to me like a stripper in the night in this crunk situation. They said, let them hoes fight. Like, what? Mushmouth began to talk in shock from a gold-covered grill shot. Man, them hoes fought. Wait a minute. Mushmouth began to talk in shock from a gold-covered grill shot.
Do you think he's just saying whatever comes into his mind, and just like that's the lyrics, like afterwards?
He's saying this dude started talking. He had a grill, right? He's talking. Oh my god, man, them hoes fight. Knock the bitch out was the next phrase that I heard, and the verb turned to blows as the hose went toes to toes. Then a stank hoe bitch step up and shook her fat glutes, and the gargantuan bitches knocked out each other's tooths. Oh my god. Brothers bet money, and the booty shake music played, and the sex and the violence was displayed. It was hot and it was packed, and it seemed like hell, and everybody was under some kind of hoochie spell. But like, listen to tell me this isn't a catchy tune. I mean, the music is always good. All right. Get out your Kleenex, get out your dirty socks. She should have put away from this fool's mouth. Then she parked her, then she pushed her pussy inside the house. My big armor had a cat with her too. Got me sweating like a convict in a telephone booth. Was it to her with some yuppie pervert way? When she looked Hold on a second.
Oh wait, her opponent straight looked like a jailhouse gorilla. Big musty poodle, the little skiller killer. They got out of line to dump her in the middle of the night. It was all was it nice when they said, let them all fight them all. Just a second. I'm going to share something else. I got to share the lyrics because you got to read the lyrics. This is the verse we just listened to. Then this girl that was just in the boxing ring put back on her bikini and she did a nasty thing. She stood a foot away from this fool's mouth. Then she puckered. Then she pushed the inside out. Oh my God. This one primate bomber had a gap in her tooth. Got me sweating like a convict in a telephone booth. I was addicted to her in some yuppie pervert way when she looked at me. Now, I mean, why is it that he still paints a picture? When he says some yuppie pervert way, it's like, I actually understand what he's getting at. And when she looked at me, 100%. I got the shivlets. Her opponent straight looked like a big, musty, putrid, the Thriller skillet killer. They collided like two dump trucks in the middle of the night. It seemed wrong, but seemed right. He is too precious. Let me just tell you, he is way too precious. We will only recognize his genius when we have lost him. I'm afraid that's the truth about Angelo Moore. I have this horrible feeling that, like, you know, a day's going to come when God, you know, I hate to say it, but eventually
day will come when he's gone, and it's going to be like musicians everywhere mourn him because he's
Oh,
that guy
yeah.
that like he's
Yeah.
just one of those guys that most like I hate to say citizens, but you know, like people haven't heard of, but then like among the musician community, everybody's like this guy was just like a genius among geniuses,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so he was so many layers away that people couldn't recognize, just like couldn't keep up with him, you know. And that's how I feel
100%.
about a lot of their music.
Yeah,
You know?
100%, man. That documentary that they put out too, when you had all those other bands that talked about how they were inspired by Fishbone. And I agree, man. I mean, in terms of frontman, probably the best I have ever seen. Like, hands down, my favorite frontman of all time. He's just so charismatic and so engaging, you know?
Yes,
He's
and
streaming all
good
this craziness,
and
but so
talented.
incredibly, charismatic and talented. And he's giving you everything, you know?
Say what you will about a guy like David Lee Roth, and I'm not trying to take away from David Lee Roth, okay? But David Lee Roth is one of these guys who's pointed at as like the greatest frontman, okay? I'll give you that David Lee Roth is like athletic. He's all over the stage and like he can do that stuff. But David Lee Roth cannot sing anywhere near the level of something like what an Angelo Moore can do. I mean, you know, David Lee
Right.
Roth will get the lyrics out he's putting on the show, but singing and doing harmonies, like that's not what he's focused on. And Angelo Moore can do it all. That guy can do it all. He's like a savant. It's like something just
Mhm.
switches on and he's just like, it's like all that
No lip
training that I think,
syncing, you know?
no.
Jumping
Dave,
around
he
like
would,
that. And
when we would see him at these shows and he would be on a microphone that had a wire, and he would just obviously in advance, he would make sure he had the longest wire that they could get him, you know, and he would jump into the crowd with the microphone, be singing while crowd surfing on time. Like the guy is performing from within the crowd while people are lifting him and carrying him around. And then they would carry him to the far end of the venue, and he would then climb up the balcony, and he would often have the wire and it would stretch all the way across the people, and he'd just be taking. So while he's putting on this amazing show, it was just as important to him that you could hear him and that he was like singing harmonies and his parts were right, you know, and he's leading the band and like singing along with the band and cheering, you know, it was like leading the whole crowd. It was
When we went to see him, he didn't do, I mean, that was also probably, 10 years ago.
yeah.
He didn't do any of stuff like that, right? I don't remember him climbing
No.
around.
No, not
he
anymore.
it's you know, he can't do that anymore. He's how old do you think he is at this point, Mike? He's in his late 50s probably.
I was going to say, yeah, he's got to be at least 10 years older than us, I would think. Because they were around 70s, early 80s, they started.
His hardcore stage diving days are past him, but
Right.
man, back in his day, he was just amazing. This the talent, and then again to play the saxophone, playing the bass saxophone. He's got like 4 saxophones. You know, he's got the bass saxophone, which weighs like I don't know, 150
Yeah,
pounds.
man.
Like the thing is absolutely
Baritone,
enormous.
Oh, God.
What a
And
talent!
we saw them at Rutgers, and then like we were into them a little bit already, but after that we were sold. And then it was like not long after that, remember they had like a pay-per-view concert.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we got it. And that's the concert where his pants ripped and he was playing pretty much buck naked for half the show.
Yeah, I think he might have grabbed tape or something and like tried to tape it shut a little bit or whatever. Like, yeah, his jeans completely ripped. I found that on YouTube not long ago, within the last year. I remember seeing it on YouTube, and it's
awesome.
a grainy, horrible recording. And they didn't sound great because the sound system wasn't great. And Dave, it's almost like Fishbone is like the Jets of the music world. You know, it is like, of course, yeah, naturally they get like this chance to be on like national. They had a thing. They were on Saturday Night Live with Jeremy. What's his name?
Jeremy Irons.
Yes, it's Jeremy Irons. And they played, and I don't know what to tell you other than the sound was terrible or something, right, Mike? But I mean, you listen to it and you're like, they're just kind of flat. It just doesn't sound good. So it's like they had a couple chances to be like on the national stage, and they just true to form. It's like something's always not quite right. We just saw on Instagram not long ago they announced like
they broke up, right?
Yeah, well, not technically. So Norwood Fisher left and Walter left. So now the band is Angelo, Chris Dowd,
right,
and a bunch of other, you know, previous and whatever non-original band members. I don't get it. How could you not have Norwood? How could you not have Walter Kibbe? They're alive. They're still playing music.
They probably had a huge argument, or it was something like that again with the theremin. Or I mean, Dave, apparently like this whole Chim Chim album that Dante was describing. So they say in the documentary, because this album has Angelo Moore playing the theremin. You know what theremin is?
No.
It's like
It looks like a little staff. It looks like a radio antenna.
Yeah, and like doesn't one sort of go horizontal and one is vertical, and you move your hands to interfere with the frequencies that they produce, and you create sort of like these radio sounds, radio frequency. Yes.
Yep.
And he's playing that in tune, right? Like, but on all the songs of the album. And so apparently there's this whole story behind it that he wanted this to be like the most prominent instrument on every single song, to the point where like the band almost broke up. And apparently the producer said like they had to ultimately agree. And then at the last minute when he wasn't there, they just turned down the volume on it and just did the final cut of the album. And you can hear it, but you can tell like it is turned down. It's in the background.
Oh my God. It just sounds like so possibly real. You know what I mean? Like it just sounds so plausible. It just sounds so plausible. Turn up that theremin. And they're like, dude, enough with the theremin.
I'm telling you, man. So Terrence Howard is channeling his inner Angelo Moore. That's the moral of the story.
That's the moral of the story. Oh my gosh. Should we wrap it up with that? Did we come full circle with that one?
I feel like we did, actually.
I wonder if Terrence Howard is a Fishbone fan.
Don't be surprised if he's like mentioned on the Fishbone album. It's like he's like, well, actually, I came up with a lot of these concepts with my good friend Angelo Moore. I don't know if you've heard of him.